Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. This is the Aspen City Council work session for January 27th, 2025. We have a couple items on our agenda. We have the entrance to Aspen polling results, an ISIS theater deed restriction discussion, and a council opportunity to talk about some joint work session agenda topics for our meeting upcoming with the BOCC. Welcome back. We're going to start off with entrance to Aspen polling results.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. I'm Jen Newton. I'm a senior project manager in the city manager's office. I'm here with Carly McGowan, who's a senior project manager in the transportation department. This presentation is by Probosky Research to go over the entrance to Aspen polling that was conducted in November and December. The survey questions were developed to understand community sentiment regarding community values that may be used in the development of the scope for a new environmental impact statement. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Adam Probosky.
Thank you, Jen. Mayor, Council. I am going to go through the kind of the top line results of the statistically valid survey, and it's got a bunch of slides, so feel free to interrupt as necessary. Methodologically, I want to point out we had in this survey 300 completed surveys, 300 voters. This was among voters, and this is very typical of a community your size. 300 is more than adequate, necessary to give you a statistically valid understanding. We mailed every single voter, conscious of the fact that mail service may not have delivered every single one of those. But we also emailed and called people and sent text messages to onboard them to the survey experience. And you can see that 10% of the folks were talked to us on the phone. The rest of were online in some capacity, so got there through the mail, got there through a text message or an email message. In some capacity, they got to the online experience. 1% of your voters chose to complete the survey in Spanish. And we took pretty serious security precautions to make sure that each voter only had one chance to vote or to give their opinion. It took about 12 minutes, so it was a commitment to reply to the survey, and it was representative of the demographics of your voters in town. So we ask an open-ended question. How do you feel about what's the most important issue facing Aspen today? This is top of mind. This isn't necessarily anything other than that, and transportation comes top of mind. After that, housing affordability and specifically infrastructure, and they mentioned the bridge. So that really is a part of the people's thought process, and that could be a little bit influenced by the fact that the mail we sent specifically talked about the bridge. And so I wouldn't read too much into that, but you can see the things that really aren't necessarily top of mind, like healthcare perhaps, or immigration policy, things like that. One person might have said that. Next up, how important is it to you that the process is community-led when we're talking about a solution for the entrance to Aspen? 71% say that's important to them. 28%, we round up, says unimportant. So certainly a big factor in that in their decision-making process. I'm going to try to move this out of my.
Maybe press that X.
There we go. Sorry, Council. In my way, but all right. Next up, we've got, oh, there we go, much better. Next up, we've got the question about traffic congestion and travel times. How important is it to you that those are part of the consideration set when solving the solution to entrance to Aspen? 86% say it's important. We never dismiss the people who say unimportant or the people that say unsure, the person who said unsure, but clearly that delta between the two, important and unimportant, makes it very relevant and one of the highest ranked things that people care about. Next up, 60 to 30%, or 69, I'm sorry, to 30% say it's important when it comes to increasing public transit, greater use of buses, multimodal options. They really want that to be a part of the consideration set when you're looking at the solution to the entrance to Aspen. So certainly a big part of that, but less than a third think not important to them. Importance on being a commitment to protecting the environment and wildlife specifically. You've got 70% say it's important to them. So all these things are clear, specific majorities and sizable majorities. Policy-wise, you get to dismiss anything, but these are all things that the public, your voters specifically, want to be included in the process. And then there's a desire to have the alternative to have majority acceptance by the Aspen community. It's a recognition that basically 2/3 say they want kind of a coalition of all, or most. Cost of potential alternative is a part of their concern, that it's important to them. We didn't talk specific dollars at this moment, but there's still a good majority say it's something that they're concerned about and they want to be part of the conversation. The chosen solution, we talk about, could cost, at this point, $150 million. We put the big dollar tag on it, and we say that that could be borne by the voters or the taxpayers in Aspen. How important is it to you that this fact is considered in the solution? 69% say it's important to them. It's interesting that this is not the highest number as far as what people are concerned about being most important to them. It's the traffic congestion. So big number, but not the highest number when it comes to dollar amount. How important is it to you that the alternative ensures multiple ways for residents to leave the city, right, in an emergency situation? 83% say it's important to them. So those two things, if you recall, one is congestion, and now the ability to have an alternative exit from the city, being top priorities. Important to you that the entrance to Aspen alternatives fits the character of the community aesthetically, and that's, of course, pretty subjective, but maybe not for you collectively, but 73% say it's important to them. And then you can see out of the list of values, we list values that were in a document. Remind me what the document was.
So it's part of the purpose and need that was in the original record of decision and the EIS process. So there were 10 community objectives, and we provided some, and I think maybe the next slide potentially shows this, but some context. What did these mean, or at least the questions did online have what did livable communities mean, and what does safety mean, that kind of thing. So, but those came directly from the 10 objectives that were in the record of decision.
So that's where the words came from, and so maybe they might not look necessarily like values to you, but that's where the words came from. And you can see emergency access comes the highest, and it cascades down. We like this kind of reporting because it shows you that all these things are in some level important to people, but that bulking at the top, clearly emergency access, livable communities, and safety are the top, and it kind of drops a little bit from there. And so those would ostensibly be the things that you might want to have highest in your mind when considering the options. Concern about increased traffic and congestion during construction, a reality. Almost 2/3 saying it's a concern of theirs, and a third that say it's unconcerning to them. You can conjure in your mind why maybe they're just not leaving town very often. It's not important to them, but 2/3 say it is. We then explain the impacts that could happen on open space, and where people walk their dogs, and you've got pretty much a mixed bag there. The same number of people say they're concerned about that as the number of people say they're unconcerned about that. So this is it's a draw, nowhere near the level of concern and issue that the other issues are to the public, to the voters. So we get in some details here, trying to condense a lot of big concept into a sentence or two. And we talk about how the last inspection at the time of the survey showed that the CDOT had rated the bridge at 50.3%. And should it fall below that, there's some ability for them to kind of, take some action. And we ask here, are you concerned about, basically not having a say here to some degree and having CDOT have more of a control over the process? A plurality, actually a majority, a very slim majority say they are unconcerned with this. So really at this point you might be confused, right? Well, why would you not be concerned that the state would get involved in this capacity? And it's really about the attributes at this point we understand that people care more about necessarily than the process, perhaps. They care about those things: emergency exit and traffic. Are you willing to consider an entrance to Aspen solution that utilizes the open space for automobile transportation? So 70% say yes. And again, there's some context here that the preferred plan doesn't necessarily allow that. So not everybody has that, but there's a strong support for automobile transportation for the alternative. And then we gave everyone a choice for each of those 4 different options. And this is where kind of a unique thing came in. The mail was sent to all voters, so many of them, most of them, should have had a copy of that they could have used to go online. When we emailed, texted, or called them, or they called us, they should have had that with them. And if they didn't, in the online version, it was just there for them to see all 4 of the options, the choices. And if for some reason we called them or they called us and they didn't have it in front of them, we gave them a website where they could go to while they were talking to us to see the alternative plans. So everybody responding should have definitely had access to the visuals of each of the different plans and alternatives, and virtually everyone did have it in front of them when they were talking through it. And you can see there's the first, second, third choice there, but you can see modified direct is the clear winner in that first choice, and we can analyze the data in a lot of different ways, but modified direct would be the number 1 choice here. And I'm sure there's all kinds of opportunity to come back and look at these numbers. We then kind of visualize this a little bit differently to perhaps give you a sense of how that looks and why modified direct has such a big number there and a strong support. And then we ask, is there anything we didn't cover in this survey, right? Something you want to share. And this was a open-ended question. We should note that there, but these are open-ended responses that you can read through and see what people said that may have more of a punch to them necessarily than a categorization of them. And but you can see traffic and just the whole theme of things comes up. Bridge repair, things like that. We didn't get into the details of certain things like that. So it's an opportunity to read through those. But we definitely wanted to give people a place to vent. Demographics, just so you can see what your voters look like. They are different than your residents to some degree. There are, interestingly enough, more men than women, which is not the case in normal populations in the U.S. There's clearly a much higher, older component to your voters than there are necessarily, not too different, but than there are among your residents. And it's some other attributes there you can see. So, much higher college rate, things like that. So that's just who your voters are who responded to the survey. I know there's a lot of data. Happy to answer questions or go into anything else we can help you with.
Great. Bill, questions?
Thanks, Adam. Thanks for coming back again to present these results. Appreciate it. I found it interesting that there was a disparity in some of the results between the, what do you call it, the scientific method or the, what was the terminology you used? I'm sorry.
Unbalanced.
Balanced and unbalanced, is that correct? You know, given sort of how relatively uniform our population is compared to other communities, I was surprised to see such a disparity. And is that accounted for in that 6.8% margin of error that you showed on the first slide? Or could you talk a little bit about sort of, is this expected, unexpected? How are we to interpret that?
So, the margin of error on the statistically valid version is 5.8%. And yes, from a math standpoint, the numbers could vary, up or down on that. Luckily, you have some pretty big numbers that really wouldn't change the overall sentiment very much, right? You've got numbers in 70s and 80s that would clearly show the majority where the majority is. We were happy to open the survey to kind of everyone and make sure that everyone had the opportunity to respond and report all of those responses. The disparity is really due to the fact that there's a non-natural mix of residents in that unbalanced version, meaning it is demographically different and less diverse. It just happened to have a whiter, more college-educated, ostensibly wealthier group of people before we created a statistically valid version. So you can imagine that maybe those demographics would be a little bit different than some of their neighbors, perhaps. So that's why I purposefully call it intentionally unbalanced. It's just a bunch of data that isn't really. I don't put a lot of stock in it. Not that I'm dismissing any one of your residents or voters. It's just it doesn't represent the town. Does that make sense?
Yeah, my only counterpoint would be, I think I understand what you're saying. My counterpoint would be those who vote probably better represent the unbalanced results than the balanced results. I don't have science to back that up, but that's my feeling. Because we only have about 50% voter turnout here? Less?
Depends on the election. I think a low of 47% and a high of 73 in the national election. Anyway, but municipal elections, yes, it's down around the 50% line.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, I think the voters, the statistically valid version is representative of voters. So I would
Potential voters.
Well, no, of actual registered voters.
Registered voters, right, but not necessarily those who actively vote and participate, is my point. Again, it's just my sentiment that I'm expressing, but.
Sarah?
Yeah, on that point, we specifically felt that that was beyond the scope that City Council requested, that your direction was registered voters not to inquire about an individual's voting history as part of the survey. And so we honored that in this process. The process used here is the most common process used in polling, except for in campaigns, where that additional question comes in. Or maybe certain types of social science research might also ask that question. But typically for local governments doing polling, we do not ask whether you have voted recently or not. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Any other questions at this time? John or Ward?
No, I found the information pretty straightforward. Thanks.
Comments?
Well, my comment would be that regardless of which set of data that you analyze, that the basic trends are the same, and that since we did, as at the City Council, ask for registered voters in Aspen to give us an idea of how they felt, I think that if this were conducted valley-wide, we might have some significantly different results, but it's up to the voters of Aspen to make this decision.
Thanks, Ward. Bill?
The only one thing I'd add is sort of just my take on it, looking at both the balance and unbalance, is that we're still kind of split 50-50 on the preferred alternative and other solutions. And, it really cements my position that anything we do here should have more than a 50.001% approval on it, and we need to make sure that we get something that has a strong majority, healthy majority buy-in on it. So I'd just like everyone to consider that and take that away from this, is doing something that only 50% of our population accepts and the other 50% dislikes strongly is not necessarily a good decision for Aspen. Thanks.
Just in response to that, Bill, that's democracy in action.
John?
I just wanted to add, I don't have the paperwork in front of me, but when this polling first came out, I did a side-by-side comparison of the balanced and the unbalanced results, and I was surprised really that there wasn't a huge difference, 2.5%, 3% at the maximum in most instances between the preferred results and the unreliable. So that actually speaks to me that the polling was accurate. So that doesn't bother me, the difference in that. And when 70% of people say they're willing to use the Meralt for transportation, that speaks to me. And that the emergency access is the top value listed by Aspen voters. That speaks volumes to me. Thanks.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you very much. It's not unknown to any of us that this was not your smoothest of clients that you've had to work with. I think I said that we may not be the most fun ride at the amusement park, but it's certainly thrilling. So I hope you enjoyed the ride. Thank you for going back out and getting the additional responses. I really appreciate a survey that captures 650 respondents. That's really great. And I thought that the information that you brought forward, the numbers that you show here are consistent and reflective of the community. So I think you did a great job of taking somewhat of a survey that was set up by non-scientific entity, and you really adapted it and made it work. So for that, I thank you so much for your work on this. For me, over the last couple of weeks, as we've gotten this information back and we've had different conversations, including some of our own internal work as we look towards needs and purpose. And, I'm reminded constantly that the biggest changed condition that we see right now is that the rail corridor and the light rail for most people is not the driving force behind this highway rebuild, if you will. I still believe that having that rail corridor available and the future use of a light rail or some other mass transit solution should be remain open, not closed. But I do think that it's a change condition from the original record of decision where that was a real driving force in getting to a new entrance alignment. For me, I'm really glad that we are in a process that we're in where we are looking at the best alternatives for our community. With the change conditions and other alternatives available, I really look forward to continuing this work. All we're really trying to do is get community input that gets forwarded on to the process and CDOT. And so I think that we're in the right place, and I think we're doing the right moves, and I think that we will be getting some alternatives available to our community, whether it's in the next coming months or the next year, but I look forward to the process that we're in. I think it's the right process. So I thank you again for your work on this. I really do. Any other questions for staff, legal, or our survey, Adam Probolski? Not at this time. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Our next item on our agenda is for an ISIS theater deed restriction discussion. We're going to have ISIS representatives come forward.
Mr. Mayor, if I may briefly,
Yes.
this was a request from counsel for the ISIS to me to ask for a work session with council to discuss changes that they would, are looking at for the space that they have, and particular occupancy and use deed restriction amendment and covenant that has been amended before, but they're seeking another amendment to that document. I believe they'll make a presentation of what they're interested in and looking for and the input they wish from council at this point. So I turn it over to them if that's okay with the mayor and council.
Thank you. Council members, do you have any questions of the city attorney at this time? Any clarifying questions? Great. Yeah, if you guys would love to start the presentation or questions, whatever you like.
Great, thank you. First of all, thank you very much for meeting with us today, and a special thanks to Jim True for helping make it happen, and congratulations to you for your retirement, but condolences to the rest of us in the city of Aspen for losing you, and we appreciate it very much, what you've done for us to date. I am Catherine Chapin, and I am the chair of Aspen Film as of September of 2024. And we have Sam Saxton, who is our treasurer. I think you know this gentleman here, John Kinnelly, who is our legal representation, and Susan Rubel, who's our executive and artistic director for, what, 7 years? 7 years. Aspen Film itself, grassroots organization, started in 1979, founded by Ellen Hunt. And our slogan has been independent by nature, and we have remained an indie organization since then for 45 years. We're very small, but we are very mighty. Our community impact is that we reach over 30,000 people throughout the Roaring Fork annually. And we have an extensive education and youth outreach program benefiting schools and youths. We have a sheet that we're going to pass out to you after our presentation, which talks a little bit more about what it is that we do. Now, if you'll indulge me just for a few minutes, I would like to take a moment to establish the parameters and background about why we're here, and then we'll delve into the nitty-gritty of it. But I think it's important to understand where we're coming from. So I'm going to paint a picture of the broader movie business reality. On a broad scale, nationwide movie business is way down. COVID certainly did not help that. Home theaters and Netflix became alternatives to going to the movies, and year over year, the movie business is down about 20%. The ISIS theater kind of reflects similar declines, although not quite as bad. We've been down about 10% year over year. And post-COVID, most restaurants here bounce back. They bounce back with a roar. But across the nation, movie theaters, and the ISIS included, did not bounce back. We were mandated to stay open during COVID. We paid our HOA dues, we paid operating fees, and we did not get any city or governmental reprieve or allowances to help us stay open. Now, the picture of Aspen Film's reality. For 45 years, we've been profitable. We've been a wonderful organization, self-sustaining, putting on 2 to 3 film festivals or events a year, summer camps, very involved in schools, education programs, and we've had a fairly consistent $1 million budget. But over the past 4 years, we've been losing $170,000 a year trying to sustain the ISIS theater. This is not new news. The theater was losing $170,000 a year before we purchased it, and it is continuing to lose $170,000 since we bought it. The theater itself requires significant safety and operational repairs, and we are literally duct taping and chicken wiring all sorts of problems that exist. Many of these also existed before we even purchased the theater. But essentially, we've used up all of our financial resources to keep the ISIS running for the past 4 years. And I'm afraid to say we're currently running on fumes. And we have also severely jeopardized the health of Aspen Film as a nonprofit because we've been trying to keep it alive. The current deed restrictions that we're operating under are extremely limiting to any kind of fundraising abilities that we have and any kind of revenue options. So basically, the fate of the movie theater is that without support, the theater is going to probably face permanent closure within the year 2025. Right now, we're taking proactive steps. We've tried to close the theaters Mondays and Tuesdays to save a little bit of money in the month of December. After our Shorts Fest in April, we're going to close the theater for 2 months until July, which is a shame because that's really when a lot of the locals are here during the shoulder season and need affordable types of entertainment. We hope to reopen in July, but depending on our cash flow situation, we will remain open for as long as my buddy Sam here allows me to. So we recognize that it's a very delicate situation right now with the new elections coming up in April. But unfortunately, we don't have the luxury of time to wait for a new city council and have them make a decision. We don't have the runway to continue this if the decision is postponed. Why does saving the movie theater matter? I think that we're all probably on the same page. This is really more about, not just about saving a building. It's saving an institution that has been serving Aspen residents since 1910. And we all know that Aspen is a world-class, robust, passionate community about the arts. Losing the movie theater would have significant impact. Public sentiment. Over and over, we have heard from people that we're the only affordable, multi-generational form of entertainment in Aspen. We have compiled a bunch of quotes from people, and just a couple that I want to read out loud, because quite frankly, it's really interesting to hear from people who are so passionate about Aspen Film and the movie theater. Nancy Magoon says, absolutely, I do not want to live in a city without a movie theater. Chris Klug says, our family loves the ISIS Theater, which has been a part of our lives since Dominic introduced the films. It brings great value to our community and benefits families like us. Gabby Raffleson says, I feel the ISIS Movie Theater should remain an affordable community space for all ages to educate, entertain, and nurture our souls. Alan Fletcher, the president and CEO of Aspen Music Festival, says, I sincerely hope that the city will be supportive as possible in giving Aspen Film the flexibility to increase contributed as well as earned revenues to sustain this great Aspen treasure. It goes on and on and on, but I want to read one last one by a woman by the name of Ann Abernethy. Does anybody know Ann? Okay, well, Ann should be a writer because she really summed it up quite brilliantly for us all. The ISIS Theater, Ann says, is an anchor of the Aspen connection. It's been a gathering place for people to laugh, to cry, to ponder, and to gather for more than 4 decades. It's one of the most important factors that elevates Aspen beyond a ski resort. The eyes of the globe view Aspen as a place that not only offers breathtaking beauty, abundant recreation, but it's a unique destination with cultural sophistication that rivals the largest metropolitan cities in the world. Amen, Anne. So I know I've painted a little bit of a bleak picture. But we very much want to turn this challenge into a win-win opportunity for both the movie theater, Aspen Film, and the community. and to ensure that both the movie theater and Aspen Film remain vital and affordable parts of Aspen. And we need your help to make it happen. We are not asking for a handout. We are asking for tools to preserve our small-town movie theater. It's not just a nice-to-have request. It's really absolutely critical and essential and an immediate necessity for us to continue forward. Otherwise, as I said, it's not a threat, it's just a reality. We've run out of money and we're going to have to close the ISIS theater. I know it's a lot to take in, but we're out of options. We have a couple of options that I would like to discuss with you. And the first is that we have a solution to our dire problem, and this is something that Jim had expressed earlier, what we are looking for to help. We want to preserve, but we want to reimagine the movie theater by focusing on 3 movie theaters instead of 4. So to that, we want to maintain the theater downstairs while allowing for flexibility upstairs. And what that means is that we need, number 1, the deed restrictions regarding usage amended. The change would allow us to create a financial flow for both the movie theater as well as Aspen Film. By renting the upstairs space, we can create long-term sustainability. Right now, we're operating in crisis mode. We're relying on short-term Band-Aid solutions, and these solutions are not going to work long-term, much less past April. The theater also needs a major overhaul. As I said, it's been around since 1910. The last renovation, I think, took place in the late 90s. But at this point, we've got HVAC, we've got plumbing, we've got wiring, we've got a considerable number of safety issues that we think will take approximately $10 to $15 million to renovate in today's world. So to that, we still, even with lifting the restrictions upstairs, we still don't have enough money to renovate the theater. So we're facing a little bit of a hurdle that includes something that is not necessarily on the dockets today, but I would be very remiss if I did not talk about it, such that we would have to come back a month or 2 later to rediscuss. And that is naming rights. We certainly don't want to erase the history of Aspen, nor do we want to erase the history of the ISIS theater sign, but we need an ability to raise money, and naming rights are essential for any organization to raise the funds needed for us to renovate the theater and to secure its future. So basically, the bottom line is we can't alone continue to sustain the movie theater. We would love to be able to. We're looking for a solution that allows us to be self-sustaining, to stand up on our own 2 feet, and to be able to make these important and very costly expenses on our own. And we want to be a positive impact and continue to be meaningful to the community and continue to offer affordable means of entertainment for the community, which is rapidly eroding here in Aspen. With your support, we can make that vision a reality. And so to that, I would love to open it up to a conversation about the deed restrictions. Is there anything else that anyone would like to add?
Do you want to clarify the deed restrictions for them, like the naming right to deed restriction, and that they have the ability to grant it, maybe?
Sure. So the deed restrictions in question are sections 4.E and section 7, just so we're all on the same
Just
page.
point that microphone at your face a little bit.
It's section 4.E and section 7. Sections 4.E and section 7 of the deed restriction.
Let's start with the current layout
Yep.
and just describe that so that we're all on the same page. currently, you have 2 floors.
Yes,
So you have a ground level floor and a basement level floor.
Yes.
We'll refer to it like that. On the basement level floor, it consists of three
Three.
theaters currently. Each theater has a seating capacity of
2 at 75 seats and 1 at 62 seats.
75, 75, and 62. And then those under the proposal that you're coming in with, or the idea generating conversation that you're coming in with, the 3 theaters below would remain.
yes. We might reconfigure them to be able to make one of them a little bit bigger and another one smaller, and then also potentially a community space that we can use for something other than movies.
Understood, and none of this conversation locks you into anything, just.
Thank you.
Just ballpark generalities. So the 3 theaters on the basement level would remain in some configuration, but theaters would be a use in the basement level.
Yes, and highly important to Aspen Film. We couldn't continue unless we had theaters.
And the ground floor is currently 1 theater, seating capacity of
146.
146, so a larger theater. And how much additional, so you have the theater of 146, and then how much additional square footage is the lobby area, reception area?
Hang on, the total square footage upstairs is 5,000 square feet. Hang on, let me pull out the difference. I'm not sure of the exact amount of the actual theater,
It's
but
okay.
I do have a chart here. Okay.
90-10 the theater.
Yeah.
And so what we're talking about is changing the usage and configuration of the ground level space to something specific at this time?
Well, at this time, look, we've looked into a lot of options. You know, ideally, we would have loved to have created some sort of, affordable restaurant for the city, but with that comes housing that we need to provide, and comes, a lot of complicated headaches since we own the area. We've become real estate managers, much to our disliking, by owning this building. But we're currently looking at it as a retail space, keeping it clean and as a retail space.
Okay.
That would afford us a cash flow, being able to sustain the movie theater, and it would afford us the ability to do so in perpetuity.
Okay. Are there any other details outside of that, those general details that I just brought up? Anything else you'd like to add to that kind of picture, overall picture?
I think in the deed restriction, you have the ability to do this. Maybe is what I want to, if you haven't read the deed restriction yet, city council has the ability based upon the economic changes in the industry. So when this was written originally, it was given to this exact scenario rather presciently, amazingly, when you read it. So it's not like we're asking for something that was not allowed in the deed restriction, I should say.
Okay, thank you. Questions, comments, suggestions?
Yeah, I guess this is a question for Jim or John, maybe, that I think retail is a use by right in that building. What would the need be to change the land use code?
Well, right, go ahead, John.
You want to speak, Jim?
No.
I'm not sure, I'm sorry, I'm not sure anybody's proposing change of code. We're just looking at the deed restriction. I'm not sure what the process will need to be to go to convert the theater, the first floor and second floor theater use, to restaurant or retail use. The deed restriction will need to be amended to do that. And it does contemplate, the council clearly has the authority to amend the deed restriction, but without amending the deed restriction, they cannot pursue the
Yeah,
changes to the use of the property.
I thought in the memo that, or in this presentation, that there were questions about a chicken and egg,
Well-
where the city council was leaning on this and changes to land use code. I thought.
Yeah, if that's what we conveyed, I didn't mean to do that. The chicken or egg type scenario is they go through a process to do what's necessary, whether it's a land use approval or architectural designs or soliciting rentals. Without your amending the deed restriction, that's a problem. If they can't do what they're proposing to do to make it a viable operation, without getting the deed restriction amended, you got a question of which is gonna come first. Getting some sense from council that the deed restriction can be amended or will be amended versus them going forward in their process to make it clear as to what they are going to do exactly.
When was it 2008? When was the election when the city worked with ISIS and Aspen Film to get that building, keep that building?
2007, when it was condominiumized?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was 2007.
Okay, and what are the impacts for your HOA for doing this? And are you contemplating just renting out or leasing the spaces, not selling the spaces?
Correct.
And that'd be for viability reasons, for a continued cash flow for the future. So we're not back here 20 years from now saying, hey, we need to do this again.
Yeah, I think the community over the years has indicated strong support for a theater. And I know that previous council during COVID, and our finance director, and we worked closely with Aspen Film to assure that you could survive, and rewrote got your loan rewritten and covered you. And so I think there's been an indication of support from the electeds and from the community over the years that we want a theater in Aspen. And I miss Dominic, and I also miss John Bush with his comments.
John's
before.
still around
I know, he's my next door neighbor.
and wrote us a lovely comment.
Yeah,
And
I'm sure.
also, Ward, just to that, the broader impact also is that the Crystal and the Sevenplex Theater, Crystal and Carbondale and Sevenplex and El Jabal, their future is quite uncertain too right now. So depending on what happens to them, we could potentially be the only movie theater in a 2-hour radius of Aspen.
Yeah. How often does a 146-seat theater get sold out?
Well, with the events that we've been doing fairly frequently, we've had a lot of sellouts over the holidays, and it's really a lot about the curation, and we've had a lot of bigger movies coming in. But basically, as you know, as Catherine explained, the exhibition business has been on the wane, and we knew this in 2013 before the pandemic. When Metropolitan controlled everything, their numbers were going way down. This was supposed to be confidential, but I think at this point it doesn't matter. Between 2017 and 2018, Metropolitan hemorrhaged $350,000 in cash because numbers were just not sustainable. And they had come to us in 2018 saying they did not want to renew their lease in 2020. After that, obviously, there was a pandemic. We know what happened. The theater was shuttered for 12 of 18 months. Yes, the city was very gracious in renegotiating the financing on the building, but at the end of the day, Aspen Film paid $348,000 in financing back, which we had owed. We weren't able to do it. We managed to do it. And then we had to pay all of the HOA dues because Metropolitan was not able to uphold their end of the contract. They had a triple net lease. We also had $32,000 a year of property taxes put on us. So right after the pandemic, Aspen Film was forced to cover well over $400,000 to keep the ISIS going. And this is when we came to all of you realizing that if we could come up with $2.2 million in cash to actually buy the theater, we'd be in a much better position. We did that. We hired a management company who oversees the theater. I think you know that this is not a robust valley, as Catherine just discussed, in terms of movie theaters, so we don't have a lot of choices for operators. The operator that we work with does a perfunctory job. They are not going above or beyond. We pay them monthly. We are now also responsible for paying HOA dues because the ISIS Theater is not making enough money to cover those themselves, itself. Aspen Film has been shelling out over $8,000 a month to sustain the HOA dues for the theater. We are also covering property taxes and trying to get the theater changed as a fully nonprofit entity so we don't have to pay those anymore. And with the decline, I would say it's about $100,000 a year since 2017, not counting the pandemic years, our grosses have declined. So since 2017, we were doing close to 1.1 million. I think if we end up at about 780-some thousand this year, we'll be in very good shape. So you see that there is a trend. We are not back to 2019 numbers, and 2024 is still a few percent off of 2023. So the business is just getting more complicated, and I don't know if you're aware that last year there was not only a writer's strike, but an actor's strike. So the product pipeline for movies being made into theaters has been halted again. Now, with the fires in Los Angeles and a lot of the business moving elsewhere, we're going to see another backlog, I think, because people can't get back to work so quickly. So between all of these factors and the fact that Paramount Plus exists, Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, all of these, we're competing for a lot of eyeballs. So we really look at our curation and curate very carefully for this community. I think after 7 years, I have a fairly good sense of what flies here, but we also owe it to the community to provide a lot of commercial fare. And we try to keep as much business as we can up Valley rather than having people go down to El Jabal to Movie Land. So as Catherine said, this is just really the reality of the situation, that our tiny $1 million a year nonprofit organization has been cash flowing this broken theater. It's not only just our HOA dues, property taxes, and everything else. We've had to deal with a lot of repairs, and we really need to upgrade technology. So we've literally been putting Band-Aids on problems for 2 years until we were to do our renovation, and now we're at a point that we just are not able to raise the funds we need to do this, which is why we're coming and asking for these changes.
Yeah. Would you say, I don't know how to pose this without it being a leading question, but would you say the production of the Aspen Film is supporting the ISIS Theater as opposed to the commercial films that come in? Like, I saw Wicked there, and there couldn't have been more than a half dozen people in the theater.
We rely on the big commercial movies because when, the Bob Dylan movie has been sustaining the theater over the last several weeks. Wicked, when it first opened, was doing a ton of business. So we do look for the tent poles because that's what brings a lot of kids and the big audiences in. And our December numbers were very robust. But as everybody knows, this is a resort community and everything kind of ebbs and flows. So December and January looked very good. February is always a little bit lean, which is why we're resurrecting or doing our 2.0 version of Radical Wednesdays. Thank you, Tori, for your support with Greg Stump. And we're always looking for, unique programming that will bring crowds in. So as an example, we did not do an Academy screening series this year for the first time in 30-some years because most of the big films had all opened. We did a special screening of a movie called The Brutalist, which will be coming back to the theater this weekend. It's about architecture. We partnered with the Buyer Center. We had 121 people in that theater on a sunny Sunday afternoon. So it's things like that where we really try to thread the needle, having a sense of what is going to bring people in. We don't always get it right, but this is what we try to do with our specific Aspen film programming. And there is a balance between the two because we know that the community demands both.
But I want to add to that, if you don't mind, Ward, and that is that we're trying to create partnerships and synergies with other arts organizations here. As an example, when I first came on board, one of the things that I really talked to Susan about multiple times was we need to be partners with other arts organizations. We need to be able to afford them what it is that they need in terms of, movie theaters and whatnot, and we want to become very synergistic. So as a small example of this, I had breakfast one morning with Laurel Winton of Dance Aspen. And we just getting to know you kind of a breakfast. And I asked, what some of her bless you, what some of her upcoming productions were going to be. And she said, oh, well, I'm very disappointed because normally we do an annual snowflake soiree. And we perform at the Wheeler Opera House and we perform the Nutcracker. And she said, we're not going to be able to do that this year because the Wheeler is closed and we need the money. We need to do something. And I said, I got an idea. How about you know, obviously the ISIS Theater, we don't have a big stage to do a production, but we've got a stage small and rickety enough such that you could have 3 or 4 ballerinas in beautiful tutus up on the stage demonstrating a few dance moves while we hand out wands and tiaras to all the kids who come. And we can, and Susan came up with a brilliant idea of showing the live version of the Royal Ballet's The Nutcracker. So we were able to provide hot chocolate and cookies for the kids, and the parents loved it. The parents were carrying their wands all around, and it was a very exciting, fun moment where 2 arts organizations could collaborate, both could benefit, and most of all, the community benefited from that. So those are the types of things that we want to do. And beyond that, we also realize that people want more than just to necessarily sit in a movie theater and watch something on the screen. We understand that people are very multidimensional these days. So being able to bring in artists, we had an event. Did any of you come to Film Fest, by the way, in September? Anybody? Anybody? Oh, darn it. Well, it's kind of good because you missed me on crutches on stage. So anyway, we had a local magician. His name is Eric Mead. And he's a great guy. I met him at drinks one night, and we're just talking 20 minutes into the conversation. I said, so what do you do, Eric? He said, I'm a magician. And I said, that's the coolest thing I've ever heard of. You're a magician. I mean, do you actually make money doing that? And he said, I do. I travel all over, and I have an act, and I do this, and I do that. And he said, well, what do you do? And I said, well, I just became the chair of Aspen Film. He said, are you kidding me? He said, I've been trying to get a hold of Aspen Film to maybe think about presenting a short film that I created. So in 15 minutes flat, we put together an arrangement where he opened up Film Fest for us, where he came on stage, he performed a magic act for about 20 minutes, bringing in people from the audience. Lights go down, Eric gets off the stage, and then up pops Eric on the silver screen for 20 minutes. It was fantastic, and people just thought it was absolutely fabulous. So we're trying to do multidimensional things with other arts organizations here in town.
You mentioned that you might have to shutter by April. How,
We are planning to shutter it.
For off-season.
For off-season.
okay, how far along are you in, what's your timeline if you get approval to change the deed restriction to being able to do the modifications that you envision are needed to convert to some retail space to get that cash flow that you're seeking?
I would prefer not to let Sam answer this question, but I'm afraid I'm going to have to.
Thanks for that. You know, we don't have a strong timeline right now that we want to give you dates on anything. We were more looking for guidance today to see if we're on a path that would be amenable and we could put more of a plan behind it. I do think if we were on a path to changing the deed restriction, that would put wind in our sails for fundraising to support the ISIS in the meantime, while we then put the plan together for the larger renovation and the budgeting for it. I realize that's a non-answer to your question, but it would only boost our ability in the short term to continue to try and stay open if we knew we had a viable plan. Because right now we're looking in the abyss, and so it's hard to fundraise when you don't have a plan that we have conviction in that it'll survive.
But I'm assuming that we would, if things go as hoped, we would get through the summer, keep the theater open, keep the community happy, and hopefully try to get, as you say, wind in our sails for next off-season.
Yeah,
But fundraising is always a bit interesting.
Fundraising has grinded to a halt right now. I don't have the heart or the discipline or the ability to look someone in the eye and say, please, we need a plug in this sinking ship. There are 360 other holes in it, but could you please plug this one? We did get a wonderful donation from Mel and Adam Lewis to help with the back pay of HOA dues, but that's not a kind of contribution you want. You want a forward-looking, exciting, excited about the future type of contribution to really sustain this.
Just one final comment that I hope you have your armor out for changing the naming rights. See what happened to the music tent and, you know, the West End Social Club and.
Yeah. Well, look, I understand that there's an emotional attachment to it, and I appreciate it, and I value it, and it's part of Aspen's history. And it's also, quite frankly, what a lot of people have fond memories of as, through generations. So we don't want to disrespect that. We don't want to just make that all go away. We're certainly looking for creative options on how to creatively maintain the iconic sign. We've got to maintain that. But how we do it is something that we would, love to get more brilliant minds in on a collaborative way of doing it. But, to do anything these days, unfortunately, you need naming rights.
I love it when I look through Dance Aspen or any of the other who donated, and I love it when it says anonymous. So maybe we can have the ISIS Theater named anonymously.
If
You have a big anonymous donor, we are all ears.
Ward, we're accepting checks this afternoon.
I was going to say, we won't put your name on it, Ward.
So I'm just going to offer a couple of comments to move this along. I am in favor of the general concept here. I understand. I was also on city council when we did approvals for this 20 years ago, however many years ago. And, our mission at that time was to maintain the amenity for the community, and the amenity was theater and film. So, I can understand the changes that are happening in the industry, and I can understand changes that may make theater and that presence still stay here in Aspen, and that is something that I do appreciate. I do have reservations about naming rights and how you would pull that off, so I don't know that I support that. I was more excited about an interactive ground floor level of a restaurant space or a theater, a film and theater themed restaurant and space that could be used for the community, and less excited about retail, especially luxury or high-end retail.
Yep.
I just don't think that serves the community. But I am supportive overall of your general question and concept. I understand it.
So, Tori, if we did entertain something like a restaurant, how would we deal with the housing issues for employees?
I don't know. I don't know exactly what would be required or what wouldn't, or council's authority for any waivers of mitigation in that area. I don't know about that. We can have more conversation about that, or you could with our legal. My last question, though, for you is, so you've looked at potential revenue for a remodeled and repurposed ground floor, and so you can see that there is the ability for that to really help the sustainability of the operations there.
Yes.
Okay.
And as Ward mentioned, when you went to see Wicked, blockbuster film, right? It was basically your own private theater. There were 6 people there.
Yeah.
So when Susan says that we often fill up the 146 seat theater, it's certainly not as often as we'd like, and it's dependent on home runs. Most of the time, I have had so many people send me pictures of them sitting in the movie theater, in any number of the movie theaters, and they're the only ones there. And they send me a picture of that, and I said, well, how lovely that we could afford you your own private movie theater. So, would we love to hang on to 4 movie theaters? Of course we would. Would we love it to be status quo? Of course we would. But the reality is, we don't need 4 movie theaters. And we need money to keep us going.
Thank you. John, and then Bill?
Yeah, the reality is the community can't support four theaters.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been here long enough to remember when Dominic Lenza used to introduce the films, and there's a lot of history of film in those 4 walls. We've seen the Playhouse Stage 3 theater go away. I think it's important for the community to maintain a theater in Aspen, and I'm supportive of seeing what you guys can come up with moving forward.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. Bill?
Thanks. I completely get it. I understand how much has changed here and elsewhere. No issue with the naming rights at all. I think no matter what you call this theater, people will still call it the ISIS for a long, long time. So,
Fine with us.
right. It doesn't bother me at all. I don't think there's. I think that there's a large portion of the community that doesn't have any attachment to the name. Some people may dislike the name, actually. So,
True.
I have zero issue with that. I want to offer an idea for the retail conversion. You mentioned you have 5,000 feet on the ground floor, approximately. Let's say you need 1,000 or less for the lobby functionality. I know you have the downstairs lobby too, so maybe ticketing can be upstairs and you can shift the concession, I think is the industry term, to downstairs perhaps. But maybe there's something else you could do in some of the ground floor space. Maybe it's not a full restaurant, but maybe it's some kind of complementary amenity to the community that jives with entertainment that could occupy some of the back space, like the alley side space, perhaps, and then still free you up a nice retail box in the front to generate revenue. So I'd ask you to explore that. I think that could be a win-win. You know, when granted, I haven't done this often, and I'm certainly no expert on it, but when I've visited theaters in big cities to draw people in, they're doing all sorts of virtual reality things and
Right.
you know, these interesting entertainment experiences that are complementary to theaters. So I'd encourage you to explore that. Those don't need to be windowed spaces. They don't need to be street-facing spaces. And we're missing that. You know, I just on Saturday brought a couple of my kids to Yogi's, and they have all these like retro arcade games, and it's great. We need that type of experience and amenity in Aspen. Hopefully at Armory we'll have some other type of similar things, but I think we could use a lot more. So you know, I'm super supportive of this. I'd encourage you to explore that idea. You know, what could we sort of offer back to the community in exchange for making this compromise? That would certainly get me excited. And then lastly, I'd say let's do this as like a 15-year experiment. That would give you enough time to have like a 10-year deed restriction, or I'm sorry, a 10-year lease to a retailer perhaps, plus make all the renovations necessary to create that white box space, if you will. And then maybe it's another, in 15 years, it's an opportunity for that council at that time to sort of reevaluate whether this is the right thing, whether Aspen Film remains viable at that point in time, which I hope it does, of course. And so it doesn't necessarily need to be a permanent forever change. You know, maybe at that point in time, who knows, something changes and you want the space back for another use, and this would allow for that sort of contemplation. But super supportive of making sure you guys stick around.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep, Jim?
I have a question about the naming rights issue.
And sorry, we didn't mean to just, spring this on anyone. It's just, I wanted to be completely honest and transparent about what our continued problems would be should we actually get what we came here for lifted.
The True Theater?
Pardon me?
The True Theater?
Yeah.
Yes, the
I
true.
was going to mention that, but that's okay. The building itself is the agreement says the building will remain the ISIS building. The section that was mentioned earlier, Section 7, which talks about naming interior theaters, but done so without, it can't be done without the consent of City Council. My question to Aspen Film is, what are you looking for as far as a change? Do you want to name the building, and with or without consent of council?
Well, we'd certainly like the consent of council, and we'd certainly like for everyone to be a partner in this. We're not looking to go against anyone or say that we have the right to do anything. We are looking for the best way forward for this building, for the theater, and in turn, Aspen Film.
Yeah, I understand that, but I just want to make sure everybody understands what is being requested here, because, you know, the way it was written, which was only talking about interior theaters, was if they wanted to name it,
But we agreed when we bought the building that we had the right to name interior theaters.
I thought there had been a change.
Yes.
Was that part of the contract? Okay, so there was an agreement that removed the requirement to go to council for consent for interior
For
theaters.
interior, yeah.
Okay. I was trying to find that and I couldn't find it. That's what I thought I remembered. But it gets back to, if you're naming the building, I think it would be appropriate for council to consent to that name. So I just wanted to make sure everybody
And to
understood
highlight
that.
the issue, we really have the business model issue, which is the use of the ground floor. But then, if we were granted that permission, we have the renovation cost of $15 million that we have to solve somehow. And we are, you know, most community organizations here in the valley have used the naming rights to be the bedrock of that fundraise, which is what we would be seeking.
Right, so there's a couple of different things at play here. One, the building itself is the ISIS building, and that's in the deed restriction agreement and covenant that I have in front of me. But then there is your space within the ISIS building. I've had conversations about this previously, and there's ideas of renaming it, such as the Aspen Film ISIS Theaters. But what you are looking for is to put somebody's name on it in the hopes that somebody will give you a large contribution for their name to be on the building. You know, people have different personal opinions
Sure.
about that. You know, for me, the reason that it's not appealing to me is that is, it flies a little in the face of what Aspen's kind of fundamental community values are, and that I believe that we look at Aspen as greater than any one individual, and that kind of buying and naming of Aspen is a little counter to community values. People have different expressions about that. I think that there's ways to do it tastefully, and I think there's ways to do it not so tastefully. So again, I have reservations about it. I think there's ways to do it that I would not have any concerns with, and there's other ways that I think would make me alarmed on behalf of my community. That's all.
Yeah, we're open to that. We're open to creative ways for,
Absolutely.
you know, Jane Doe Theater at the historic ISIS. Is there a middle ground there, something like that?
Things like that.
So the other thing is that, I mean, if you, just like the previous people conducting polls, if you went out and you conducted a poll of all people in Aspen, would they know that that building is called the ISIS Theater? I mean, the ISIS building? Probably not. But if it were the, you know, so-and-so family center for entertainment, a community center for entertainment, that to me actually adds cachet to the building. So just being able to include words such as community, such as, you know, something that invokes a gathering space, and something that invokes that this is for the people of Aspen.
And for the arts.
And for the arts. So we'd have no vanity in terms of we want it to be called Aspen Films, you know, whatever theater. We have absolutely zero desire to do that, or at least I don't. I guess I haven't really consulted with you guys, but it's really more about fundraising and the ability to move forward and move forward quickly.
Yeah, we're clear-eyed about, we've tried to raise $15 million. This was not our first option to come here and say, let's
Right.
change the use of the building. If we did, we wouldn't be here. So we're looking for solutions on that front to preserve the building.
Well, in today's work session, from the four present members of the council, you have, your ability to move forward with some of the planning that you're talking about.
If I may, I can work with John to come up with specific amendments that would need to be approved by council pursuant to those terms of the current deed restriction, particularly paragraphs 4E and 7.
Thank
We
you.
can bring those back at some time.
Thank you.
in the
And I
future.
do have some sensitivity to, I think what Ward was talking about earlier with us preempting the land use approvals and necessary process through some action of council. That I would not necessarily want to do.
No, and understand, I'm not suggesting that at all, and I know that Aspen Film is aware that there may be other processes, and we cannot direct those in this amended deed restriction.
I'm going to be off of council by the time anything really substantial happens here, but my preference is that the ISIS sign and the ISIS remains in the naming of the theater or the building in some degree. As long as it's not Musk X.
Oh, darn it, Ward, you really, that was gonna be our
That's their
parting
top
gift.
donor right there. That's
Plan A out the
donor.
window.
So you're open to a creative solution as well, though?
Thank
Yeah,
you, guys.
and as are we do want to preserve the historic legacy of, since 1910. We're not about tearing all of that apart. But I will say that we are very, very thrilled with your response today. But at the same time, I don't want this to be our last meeting on it. I would very much like it to be a continued two-way street and more an informal type of way. I mean, I'd love to get on the phone with each of you and talk about, any further ideas. I mean, Bill, you had mentioned creative way for additional forms of entertainment. Love to talk with you more about that. And, John, if you have any further ideas, we'd really be delighted to continue this as a very collaborative, two-way street to really make the theater what it could and should be for the small town.
I feel obligated to say, everybody, if there are land use processes that are going to go forward, council would be restricted from having ex parte communications with the applicant over potential proposals in a land use application.
Can we use sign language or anything, or? Yeah.
You can have conversations and get more information
Sure.
until the point where you are an applicant or even on the doorstep of being an applicant would be a safe move.
Sure.
Bill?
Piggybacking on your last comment,
Yes.
I just want to set expectations clearly from my perspective.
Sure.
I probably will be here by the time you come back. And at the very least, if you're able to, I encourage those types of communications, and I'm happy to share ideas. I don't know that I have a whole lot more than what I shared tonight, but I wouldn't just show up with the agreements that the attorneys negotiate and say we're here to do this. At the very least, I think you come to that meeting with some color between the lines of what we talked about tonight.
Okay.
At the very least. Again,
Okay.
if you have more to sort of talk about and we can work together on in the meantime, and you're able to, if you can figure out whether or not there's a necessary land use process and whether or not that precludes those conversations, I think you can do that relatively quickly. But again, at the very least, when you come to present this agreement for consideration, I think provide some more color between the lines, talk about what you're contemplating for the specific naming rights, what
Yes.
what the space sizes are going to be chopped into, what the uses might be, how the theaters are going to be reconfigured, where the entrance is going to be, et cetera. Like some of those details to really help us understand it so that we can understand what we're approving, I think would be really beneficial to me at least.
Yeah, that's a very fair request, and we'll be happy to do that. Now, just ask Jim, how soon will that meeting be taking place, do we think, just in terms of bandwidth and runway?
We can.
Can we shoot
work
for a day?
together. Well, I turn that.
Sure, because it involves more than the city attorney's office for what you're asking. I think that there is some legwork with staff that needs to occur before we would dedicate specific time on the council's agenda.
Okay.
We also, since that time, will have a change in the mayoral leadership of the city. It will be necessary to do a briefing with that mayoral candidate. We can do it while they're in their candidate's not the right word, what's it called, right before they've been voted in. Thank
That's
you.
what it's
I'm like,
called.
why am I forgetting this? We just went through it. So we'll need to take those steps.
Okay.
As well, since the election's here only about 6 weeks away. Thank you.
5.
Or 5 from those who need to count.
Just happen to know.
Just happened to. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you very, very much.
you very
Appreciate
much.
your time greatly and
luck.
very much appreciate it.
Thanks for all you do.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Oh, yes, please, don't forget our important handouts.
I think a lot of people that have seen the Dylan movie have seen it more than once.
I didn't hear you?
A lot of people that have seen the Dylan movie, I know have
Yes.
seen it more than once.
Yeah.
We welcome that.
Everybody wants to see it in the theater because it has a better sound system than their home theaters.
Yeah. I invite every single one of you. We're happy to give you passes. Susan's going to have to afterwards say, you did what?
Thank you, though.
To please come to Shorts Fest.
We appreciate the invitation.
Yeah, come to Shorts Fest. It's, we're considered either the 1, 2, or, but we're considered either the 1, 2, or 3 most important Shorts Fests in the world?
Yes.
Okay, well, maybe I exaggerate a tiny bit, but. Yeah, but it's fun, it's fabulous, and the great thing about Shorts Fest, you can bop in for 15, 20 minutes, see a fun film, and, go on to your next event. Thanks, gentlemen and lady.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Take the number 1 spot from Sundance, too. Take the number 1 spot from Sundance. You can do it. Turn it in.
I don't think you need that.
I do. Well, never having been, I do, but. Good, thank God for that.
Are you, here? Each one of these gives a little bit of information.
Well, you could just leave them right, we'll grab them. We'll grab them, thanks.
I think the last time I was there, it was full.
I've read Sundance's leave is departing for Boulder or possibly Cincinnati.
Cincinnati and Salt Lake City is where it's moving to.
Yeah,
They want to still do something in Parkland.
right.
Yeah, they lost them.
I also noticed they shut down all traffic on Main Street for Film Fest, for Sundance this year.
Real quickly, for council members, we have just one more item here, and it's just about conversation about the joint work session that's coming up on Monday, February 10th. It's Monday at 4 PM here, so it's instead of our regular work session time. So you have, you got a memo.
Hey, guys.
Hey, guys.
Hello. We still have some more stuff to talk about.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
So guys, you got a memo from Sarah that was listing off some of the ideas that were generated amongst staff and for our consideration of what we want to talk about. Kelly Curry, who is the current chair, the new chair and current chair of BOCC, she and I met a week ago to just start the conversation. And she then had a meeting with her board to talk about additional ideas. There's one that's not on here that was going to be an update on homelessness and what the county is doing on their end. They've engaged a study group and to look at this issue on a broader scale than just some of the issues maybe that the city has dealt with. So that is a possibility as well. So of the list that you have here, we really need to boil it down to 1 or 2. We have some other items that will probably be at the meeting as well. So I thought from us, what I brought to Kelly was that I thought that we would love to hear more about the RAISE grant and the transportation planning work in that Aspen Airport AABC area. They, on the other side of it, wanted to see this survey results and just have a conversation perhaps around the survey results. I did furnish them the survey results and memo that we got on that so that they had a chance to look at that ahead of time to know if they have any discussion or questions about that. Nonetheless, what I'm proposing here is that I can go back to the county to talk about a potentially structured Highway 82 raise grant conversation that includes the entrance to Aspen survey, maybe next steps of what we're doing on that process as one item, and then the homeless issue and update maybe as the second item. Then I'm just here for some input from you guys.
I agree with you on 82 being a focus. I think we broaden it a little bit, and the part that's missing for me is traffic flow improvement. We share this corridor. They have a lot more frontage, if you will, or mileage of 82 in their jurisdiction than we do. And I think the piece that's missing and that we haven't talked about and that we're not working well on together as two governmental bodies is how do we make the traffic flow better? And what can we do about it together? And they have some ideas and we have some ideas, and the entrance to Aspen is one tiny piece of that puzzle, as we all understand, but I don't think everybody understands that. And so I really think that, fine, we can talk about the raise grant and the airport, and we can talk about the entrance to Aspen, but I would hope to broaden that discussion a little bit, meaning to be, how can we talk about improving traffic flow on the critical section of Highway 82 from, Mill Street to the intercept lot, or Mill Street to the airport, or, wherever you want to call that terminus, but that would be my hope. And then the second piece is I really think that wildfire takes precedence over homelessness conversations right now, and that's where we should be collaborating and making sure that we're collaborating in all the right ways. So for me, that would be my preference on the second item.
Yeah, understood. I'm not sure that we have real conversation from the county side on the fire mitigation. As you see in the memo that you have, what the city has been doing and looking at building hardening, defensible spaces, fuel load management in the municipality. But I can ask them if they have something to come to the table with.
Yeah, I think it should be an open conversation, is like, hey, guys, these are some of the things that we've been doing. Are you doing them too? Can we do other things together? I mean, the fire respects no jurisdictional boundaries, of course, right? So, are we dedicating the right resources? Is the funding in place? Can we direct staff to do things that we're not doing today or we're not doing enough of today? It's just not a conversation that we've ever had really jointly with them, or not recently, and I think is so critical at the moment.
Okay. Anything else? Bill, any others?
No, that's it. Those are my two preferences. Thank you.
Well, I'd like to see some buy-in from the county for the EOTC spending for the separated grade entrance to the lumberyard. I think that would fall well into transportation and funding for that multi-million-dollar underpass at the entrance to the lumberyard housing. And I think along the lines of what Bill's talking about, something that Sarah's brought up before, and I'm reading that maybe it's past time to have discussions about building codes and fire-resistant siding and roofing and hardening, getting rid of I saw some dramatic pictures from the LA fire of a home standing by itself because it didn't have any foliage next to the house. Maybe that's why, but there are examples where fire does some really strange things, and I think by hardening the space around your house,
your chances are better. Yeah. I actually think wildfire mitigation is a hot subject, sorry. And something that isn't on the list that I don't know if it rises to top two, but I think we need to really focus more on improving our water storage. We only have a 24-hour water supply during our busiest days, and as we learned from the Pacific Palisades fire, that was one reason why so many homes burned, was because there wasn't enough water pressure, because there was so much demand being put on the system. So water storage is a subject that I think we should not only be looking at as a city, but also regionally.
Maybe we need to get an update on what the water attorneys are on moving our storage rights down to the site that we purchased by the gravel pit.
And to expand on what John just said is, you know, just because the county doesn't have a water utility, couldn't and shouldn't they play a role in that? Do they have land that could be suitable for doing something like that too? How can they play a role in that effort, which is about more than just providing water for domestic use to people's houses? It's about protecting our community. So I think that's a good add-on to the
Yeah, I think the
wildfire
spot
conversation.
we're talking about that we purchased is outside of incorporated Aspen.
Indeed.
All right. All right, thanks for that. I'll be sending an email to them and including Sarah, because the two managers helped to put the information together and construct an agenda that can both take place in 2 hours and be effective. So, okay, thank you for your input on that. That is our last item for this evening. Want to say thank you to Grassroots as always, and remind you that we have a regularly scheduled city council meeting right here at City Hall tomorrow at 5 p.m. Please join us. We welcome any citizen comments at the beginning of our meeting. Have a great night. See you soon.